Hello again, my most amazing artists. Today, as you know, we are talking a little bit about how to make our very own paintbrushes. We're doing this because we want to understand what it's like to walk in an artist's shoes. And artists, they have to overcome a lot of problems and challenges that might just pop up throughout the entire experience of making art. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the design process looks like and how engineers and artists use the design process to create a product that is successful. And the products we make today, we will be using next class. So we're going to be doing some stretching and exploring. We're focused on that studio habit of mind. And I just want to talk to you really quick about what it is that we're using today. So here are just a few of those materials. One of the first things that we have to think about is, what is our plan? So maybe we have to decide on what materials are we using? Are we using straws? Are we using string? And maybe I want to go ahead and try to plan out the different parts of my paintbrush. Where is my ferrule going to be? What am I making the tuft out of? Is it made out of yarn? Is it made out of raffia? Is it made out of more straws? How am I going to attach this? So in the process, I might do some labeling and any other work that I need to do before I try to start using any of these materials. Remember, we put first things first, and so in order to do that, we're going to measure things. We're going to plan out our design a little bit first. Then we can check out our other materials. But before we can even do that, we have to know what our materials are. So these are just a few of the materials that you can see I'm using. I'm using some chenille stems. I'm using some straws, maybe some rubber bands. There's a variety of other materials over there. I have to think about how I'm going to hold my paintbrush. Sometimes it might be as simple as just clipping something or clipping the material in place. This can also be used as a clamp to hold your pieces together as you find a better way to attach them. We could also attach with things like rubber bands. For instance, if I wanted to attach this piece of straws that I've connected as my tuft, and then my ferrule is taped together, and then I can use that and strap it to something sturdier. So in this case, I'm going to attach it with this rubber band onto this stick. Okay, and now I feel like I could probably use this paintbrush. It's worth testing out, but I think maybe there's a variety of different ways I could use this. Another thing I can do is I can attach things with string. And you can notice that I use tape there too. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to use both to reinforce. So again, I could use a rubber band. You want to think what's going to work best for your materials. In this case, I'm going to give this a try because I want these to loosely drag. So you want to think about what kind of mark do you want to make with this, and that might change what materials you're going to use. And maybe you find that this material doesn't work for you and it's not holding things together as well as you might want it to, and then you could switch to something else if you felt that was necessary. Just be sure not to waste supplies. When we're working through these supplies, we probably only want to use one or two of each material if we're going to use them. If we find that we're being wasteful with materials, I'll probably have to take some of them away, and you don't want to be left with that when you have already created a plan. We just want to be resourceful because artists make tools and tools cost money. So we want to make sure that our tools are quality and worth our time, but not wasteful. So here I wrapped it in string. You could even tie a knot, but because I am going to tape over this, I chose not to. And I feel like that might be pretty sturdy. Now if I find that it's not and I want to do something else, I could always chop that off and use this material for something else, and I could attach it to this. Another thing I could do is I could maybe think about altering some of the materials that I have. So maybe in the case of this popsicle stick, maybe this itself is the brush. You want to be really careful when cutting through materials like this because the wood can splinter and fly off. Just be cautious of that. Don't hold it too close to your face as you're working. But think about how this could cause different marks, and I actually don't mind that it's splitting. I might even decide to pursue that further. Sometimes we get happy accidents in art too. Again, just be careful with the materials that you're using. So there are a variety of different ways that you can attach these, and I hope that you have a lot of fun trying to build your own brush. When you're done, we really have to make sure that we go ahead and mark our name and whoever we worked with. So instead of our name, we'll write our class code. Let's say my class code is 4B, just for example. And then I want to write my initials. And if I had a partner or somebody that I worked with while making this project, I would also write their initials. Okay, so that it's easy enough to find this next class so that when we go to paint, we're ready. So there are lots of different ways to make your own paintbrush, but let's just remind ourselves when we're finished, it might be a good idea to get some peer feedback. If I didn't work with somebody else on this project, it's definitely worth my time to present my ideas to somebody else and ask them how they think this material should be used. Are there any improvements that they would make? You don't have to take their suggestions. Artists just listen to each other a lot because we have different perspectives and different ideas on things. And we probably are all going to approach this project a little bit differently. I doubt any paintbrush will be the same as somebody else's. So remember, we started by defining the problem. The problem is, well, we don't have a paintbrush to paint with. We need to make our own. Then we have to think about what kind of challenges painters face. We collect lots of info on how brushes are made. So we talk about the handle, the ferrule, the tuft, and how traditional paintbrushes are created and the different parts of them. Then we brainstorm with anybody else that we want to or by ourselves, and we plan out our design. And then we can take time to develop that solution and build a model. That's what designers do. So this is just an idea. This might just be a prototype, but this is where we're going to start. And then we present our ideas to other people and get their responses, their feedback. And then if we need to make any adjustments or revise or improve our design because of that feedback that we got, and we say, oh, this isn't very sturdy, maybe I need to attach this to a stronger base, right? Something easier to hold on to support that. So then I can make those changes, and then I'm working with an amazing paintbrush. Have fun making your own tools today. Hey there, amazing artists. Welcome back. Today we are talking again about our paintbrushes that we have made by hand. And today we are working through the 5th step of the design process, which is to test our product. So today we're going to try out these different paintbrushes and see what kind of marks that they make and determine whether or not they are successful. If we feel like there are some changes that need to be made to our brush, we will come back and we will revise them. But for now, we're going to test these different brushes. Let's see what that looks like. So here I have a decent amount of paint. And I have all of my brushes. You're probably just going to have 1 or 2 brushes, but I also have a very large sheet of paper. On this paper, I'm working on top of my mat if I have one, but I'm going to start with my paintbrushes. Now, I'm going to begin by dipping this in paint, but I don't want it to be like completely sopping in paint. So I might get some of it off of there before I work on my paper. Let's see what this first brush looks like. I can try different lines. And I can see that it doesn't want to make a lot of contact with the paper because these bristles are not very firm. They're very soft. So maybe it does need a little more paint. So that is what my first brush looks like. Let's take a closer look at those marks. I'm going to work through these different brushes and see what type of different marks that they might make. For instance, this paintbrush right here is very large. It also has a really long handle, so I might try some different techniques with this one. I'm going to start by dipping it in paint. And I think that I can use this one in a different way, like I might be able to use it a little bit more like a stamp. So making sure I have enough paint on the end of my brush. Try not to get it everywhere. And then I'm going to try what it looks like as dragging it. That looks pretty good. I also want to try some marks like this. Careful not to splatter paint everywhere. Ooh, I really like that texture that it's making. Look, my zigzag lines are actually appearing. I'm going to set my brush in a safe place and show you what those look like. Pretty cool, right? Let's try one more brush. I'm going to try the one that I made out of straws. I'm going to dip this in paint. And again, I'm going to try using it in a couple different ways. So I might try dragging it and see what kind of marks it makes. That looks pretty cool. I also might try it in using almost more like a stamp fashion or a stippling technique and notice what kind of marks it makes when I do that. So again, I'm setting my brush in a safe place. I just have a spare piece of paper over here that I'm laying my dirty brushes on top of. Let's look at those marks a little bit more closely. Here we can tell that the material that we're using really does make a big difference in what type of lines are going to appear on my paper. Also, the way that I use the brush and how much paint I use really makes a big difference. Okay, now I have a new piece of paper and I'm going to test a few more of these brushes. Just some things to consider. You don't want to make a huge mess out of your brush because you want, by the time you're finished, to be able to wash it off, if that's even possible, with the materials that you used. Another thing that you want to think about is I want to be able to use this paper when I'm finished, so I don't want it to just turn into a huge mess. I really want to think about laying out a nice design and creating different swatches or placements for these patterns. So I am going to speed up the rest of this video and show you the rest of the brushes that I have over here. Okay, let's look closely at these. I know my paper looks a little bit messy right now, but remember, this is just a test, okay? This is not my final work. So a few different types of brushes that I tested here. I tested some brushes with some natural materials, which ended up making some textures that I really, really liked. I also found that some of my brushes were not very successful. Things that had really stiff bristles or things that were a little too weak to support it, such as my toothpicks brush that I have here that I painted with, made these really nice marks, but as soon as I wiped that first little bit of paint off, the rest of it actually went away. That's this line right here. Okay, and then I also found that some of the brushes that I have were a little too weak. For instance, this brush that I made with the ribbon, once it had paint on it, it was so heavy that it didn't really want to move around, and instead it wanted to stick to my paper in certain spots. So just some things to think about. Also, when you're finished with your brush, you can attempt to wash it off. Just be careful. We're going to place this work on the drying rack. I hope you really had a lot of fun making your brush, whether or not it was successful. If it wasn't successful, think about some ways that you could change it. Here, I made more of a stamp than I did a brush out of these Q-tips. And then I also made some things like out of, the straws or think about what kind of materials make what kind of mark and how you might want to approach that, because some things are going to work a little better than others. Anyway, all that being said, I hope you enjoyed painting these different marks. Take a look at what everyone else has made and notice what types of marks they have made and what you might try if you were to do this again. Thank you, and let's get started.